Okay, hello, welcome back to the Lit community. We're so glad you're all here. If you're new, LIT stands for Learning, Innovation, and Technology, and it's a space for learning pros, builders, and experimenters to share what's really going on behind the scenes of learning tech. I am Jamie Washington. You may recognize me from behind the scenes during previous LIT sessions or from the XAPI Learning cohort. But for those who don't know me yet, I'm on the marketing team at Torrance Learning. And though I'm usually backstage, I'm going to be your host today. This is the second session of our Lit Spotlight series. If you missed the first one featuring Doug DeVitri, you can find that recording along with our Lit Lab wrap-ups and details on upcoming spotlights in the Lit Library. I'm going to drop that link in the chat again. And today's session will also be added there after we wrap. Now, about today's spotlight, we are thrilled to welcome Cynthia Parshall and Liz Santana, who will be sharing their work on simulation-based testing, specifically how they developed a VR-powered learning and assessment tool for ultrasound scanning. They're going to walk us through a simulation-based test framework they use, show us how simulation and assessment come together to build real-world skills, and share a behind-the-scenes look at lessons they learned along the way. Cynthia, Liz, we're so glad that you are here. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. We're excited to be speaking to the LIT community today, and we hope that you'll find some takeaways and some little gems in our presentation. I'm Liz Santana. I'm the Director of Conceptual Research and Design, which we abbreviate to CRED here at Intellios. And Intellios is a nonprofit certification board in the medical imaging space. We have a number of different councils. Our best known is the American Registry for Diagnostic Medical Sonography. And the product that we'll be sharing with you today was created for the ARDMS. My co-speaker today is Cynthia Parshall. Cynthia is that rare unicorn who is a psychometrician, so she's really good at all of the formal test measurement things, but she also has user experience expertise. So being able to blend that scientific measurement of learning with the UX is very, very valuable to our team. Our team consists of a whole host of people. You just get the two of us today, but there's no way we could have done this without a large group of individuals. The case study that we're going to be presenting today is for an integrated education and assessment platform, and it uses a mastery learning approach to teach diagnostic medical ultrasound. Our partner in this is Vantari VR, and we've created an instructional experience that we're calling My First Scan to teach the VR controls, and then an educational module that teaches users basic anatomy and scanning protocols for the abdomen. And we started out with a module specific to the abdominal aorta. The other three modules under development include the urinary system, biliary and pancreas, and liver and spleen, and ultimately that will result in our being able to teach a full abdominal ultrasound protocol. So our development approach here is really a phased development approach. Right now, I would say we are in the validation phase, and we're starting the delivery phase for those first experiences, the My First Scan and abdominal aorta. Our goal is to add additional specialties and pathologies and virtual patients and environments over time. So we think our user base will actually expand as we work to bring this affordable technology-based simulation alternative to wider audiences. Cynthia, you want to talk to us a little bit about the testing models?
Absolutely. As you probably know, there are many types of tests, and most certification assessments are very traditional, knowledge-based assessments, often using mainly or even only multiple choice questions. But simulations can be highly effective for any practical hands-on skills. They can form types of performance-based tests or skills-based assessments, And they can be used both during an instructional phase or in an instruction education mode, and as high fidelity assessments. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll just briefly add that simulation as a term covers many different things. Just a few examples are on the screen. Scenarios or role plays that might be scored by human raters, simulation-based, screen-based simulations or digital twins, extended reality, which encompasses our virtual reality, mixed reality, or augmented reality, and task trainers. The picture on the top on your screen now in the top left is of an abdominal ultrasound task trainer. So that's kind of body parts that they can use to do specific things. So that's okay. Liz and I and some of our co-developers on this great project recently wrote a couple of papers on simulation-based testing, or SBT, and we are anticipating that they'll be published shortly. One of these papers focuses specifically on the framework, on the how, really getting into the measurement principles of how to design a simulation-based test as opposed to some other kind of test. The other is the case study, and we'll be focusing mostly on the case study today on how we've been applying this framework. So we won't go into too much detail about the framework itself, but you can see the 9 steps on the screen in front of you, and we hope to give you a high-level view of what those steps are as we walk through the case study.
And we're going to start out, dive in here to the first step in the framework, and that's defining content needs. The second step is selecting the platform. So we started out by asking ourselves what was needed. Ultrasound is a very hands-on activity, and just because I can answer questions about ultrasound does not necessarily mean that I can do it. Very different. Traditional tests do a fair job. They're really good at testing knowledge, but not as great at testing skills. So we thought that simulation or performance-based tests would make our assessments better. To determine the content needed, we worked with subject matter expert groups to look at various content outlines and curricula, what's being in the field right now, what's taught in sonography programs, what's currently hard for students to practice while they're trying to learn. Things like transvaginal scanning or scanning with a moving heart or a moving fetus or small parts for men. These are things that are very difficult for folks to practice with. And while they're not in the abdominal modules we're starting with, we do see those in the future of this program. The most common educational subjects taught to sonographers in North America are abdominal and OBGYN, obstetrical. We thought that abdominal would be easier for our very first toe in this VR development water because we didn't want to have to tackle moving fetuses at the very beginning. Although Vantari has figured out how to make the fetuses move, and we're starting to work on that OB development too. We knew we wanted to use simulation and technology-based simulation. One of our primary goals for this project is to expand the access to simulation in sonography education. So we spent a lot of time investigating what current forms of simulation are used in sonography education. They include task trainers, and some programs have high fidelity mannequins, but both of those have significant barriers as far as cost and footprint, physical space, and scalability. Ultimately, that led to our selecting virtual reality. Because behavioral skills are learned gradually and incrementally via dopamine-mediated error correction learning in the basal ganglia part of the brain, they require lots and lots of practice, and virtual reality allows for that. Embodied learning experiences like those in VR, those that have high levels of immersion, may lead to improved learning outcomes under certain conditions too, and especially if they're designed to minimize the extraneous cognitive load to maximize engagement and to ensure interaction with the learning material as the learner goes through. VR can also offer things that aren't usually offered in other simulation modalities, such as patients with varying body habitus and varied clinical settings. So I'll throw a quick question out here. You can respond in the chat if you know the answer. How many VR headsets do you think were sold in 2024? And I can come back to the answer at the end of the presentation. Now, once we defined the content and we knew what platform we wanted to use, we really needed to talk about test and task design. Our intended users, we know, are not generally VR users. They're not familiar with virtual reality, and that's why we prioritized the development of My First Scan. The goal for My First Scan is really twofold. For us, we want to familiarize the user with the virtual environment, the virtual controllers, how to interact in VR. But for them, we wanted them to be successful doing their first scan and to become excited about scanning in virtual reality. They don't care about learning the VR controllers, but they do care about doing ultrasound. So My First Scan was designed to accomplish both objectives, and we knew that it would be something that would be required before they go into the educational abdominal aorta module. Vantari VR really prides itself on building with real-world physics. And we've tried to make the scanning experience in virtual reality as close to the scanning experience in the real world as we can. There are some things that we've streamlined. For example, putting gel on the patient or on the transducer. That's something that you can't scan without, but it's really the same thing every time, and it's not a difficult skill to master. We decided to eliminate that step in VR because it's so repetitive and it's an easy step to learn, and it will help reduce the in-headset time necessary for the students, which is also something we try to make sure when they're in the headset, that time is being used appropriately. Our mastery learning approach lets users repeat protocol steps until they feel ready to move on. We provide them with learning aids, guidance, and feedback to help them as they're learning. But those can all be disabled when the user is ready to go into assessment mode and try a summative style assessment. Cynthia?
Okay. So defining our scoring solutions was the next challenge. We really wanted to have live scoring so we could provide the learners with dynamic feedback as they practiced ultrasound scanning in VR. This type of immediate feedback as the user does an activity, immediately get like a coaching model in the gym. Adjust your grip, adjust your stance. It really can increase learning a lot, as opposed to not getting feedback on something you submit for a week or two. So we thought this would be highly, highly valuable. And with our VR vendor, Vantari VR, we developed a scoring and feedback system. So I'm going to give you a little context about what you experience in our virtual reality tutorial and content educational module. You'll see a little bit more about it when Liz shows a video in a few minutes. But for now, just to give you a tiny taste, as the sonography student are in the headset, to your right and the right of the screen is your sonography patient. You've got a simulated patient, you've got a simulated transducer, and you hold that transducer over the patient's chest. And as you do that, an ultrasound image shows up, and the image to your left, you can see the ultrasound console. The ultrasound image is being changed as you move your hand over the simulated patient's chest. We've also got below that ultrasound monitor is an ultrasound console, and those buttons can be adjusted, and they'll change how bright or dim the image is, They'll change the various factors and include adding measurements on the image. So those are the ultrasound simulation components. To the left, further, you see those green bars. That is our scoring and feedback guidance system, and it is providing live dynamic feedback as the user scans. You can choose check my image, and it starts indicating if the anatomy is right, if the depth is right, if the gain is right, if the measurement's right. You can see this student where this image was frozen has gotten the first four criteria correct, and they're coded green. We call this tablet, the V-pad, and that's where the automated scoring system is shown. The student is able to use that dynamic feedback. It's constantly changing as the image is changing, and the student can correct her image, his image, until it is scored completely correct before submitting it. And that's part of our mastery learning model. So we're very excited about it, and we anticipate a lot of educational benefits. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Okay, reliability and validity are key concepts in credentialing, and they're the next two steps in the SBT framework. For reliability, the methods used to evaluate the reliability are really derived from more traditional tests. And they depend mostly on whether or not the simulation is human scored, human raters, or whether you've developed an automated scoring system. So with human scores, you would use the same kinds of methods you might use for human raters evaluating essays, for example, or architectural drawings. You might use multiple raters, apply rater training initially, inter-rater reliability analyses, and then ongoing rater refreshing training. And that would be the best way to ensure reliable scoring with human raters. When they're automatically scored, when you've been able to develop a scoring evaluation, whether checklists, whether more complex scoring methods, again, that since those are automatically, you look for how reliable is that using typical statistics for other tests, certainly multiple choice and others. One of the ways to increase reliability with those sorts of tests is to simply have more scoreable elements, more test questions, or more elements, in this case with the simulation, that are each being given a unique score. For validity, what we want to measure is, does the test measure what it's supposed to measure? Then you look at how would you compare that to their performance in other contexts? We're currently doing a study where we're having our subject matter experts, our SMEs, which is largely a group of sonography educators, and we're having them score images from the VR module that have already been scored by the system, and we're comparing those scores. And then if we identify differences, then we're finding the root cause of that and correcting them, so that once this is complete, the scores that students receive in the VR system should be very, very similar to the scores they would be receiving from a sonography educator. In the future, we can correlate students' performance in VR to their ultrasound scanning in real life, again, probably using sonography educators who would work with us on providing the scanning and real life scores that we can compare to the student scores in the system. And hopefully that will give us very good data about the high validity of the VR scoring.
All right. So at first, this is going to be a low stakes offering, right? We want to assist sonography schools in the US, but it's not going to directly impact whether someone is hired for a job or gets a promotion. But as we add content like pathologies and scanning protocol deviations, We want to widen the audience for it. We'd like to make it available through hospitals, maybe even to end users in their own environments. So we're working pretty hard to control the end user costs, and we hope that that's going to ultimately expand the access. So a lot of sonography teaching facilities have the previously mentioned task trainers. Some have the mannequins, but some have no simulation at all, and students generally scan each other. We think this will provide a viable option. Additionally, there's underserved populations like lay birthing attendants in sub-Saharan Africa that we think will be able to learn, practice, and gain confidence by using this product ultimately. However, for it to be successfully adopted by sonography educators, especially at a global level, we know we're going to have to work with those educators to help with how you do VR, how you do implementation on a given site, how you have to maintain the technology. We also recognize that some people are not going to be able to do VR. Some people just still deal with cyber sickness. It is not as big of an issue as it used to be. There have been a lot of advancements in the technology, but some people still don't want to get in headset or are uncomfortable when they do. So we know this can't be the only option for our learners, and Intellios is developing other learning and assessment pathways. Data management, in addition to the fleet management, is also critical. Virtual reality allows for the collection of a lot of data, and figuring out what data is important and pulling those threads has been challenging, and I think will continue to be. But overall, we've really tried to protect the user data and to consider data management from the outset. Meta can only see that a user is in the app. They can't see what they're doing in the app. That's firewalled, and it's only visible to Vantari. The Vantari dashboards have varying permission levels that have been created for Intellios, for the educators, for program directors, for end users. And the open API will allow data to be shared securely with other Intellios systems. So here's another audience question. If you know, what is the equivalent of a pixel in extended reality? And I'll give you that answer at the end as well. So next I'm going to go into the video of kind of what we've created, but I wanted to share an overview of the framework once more and to check and see if we have any audience questions that have come into the chat. Do you see any questions in there? Okay. Hearing none, I will keep moving. I do want to forewarn you that a video is not the same as being in headset. We prefer to have people get in headset directly to kind of see what we've created, because the sense of place that you get with the immersion just does not translate well to video. That said, we're doing a video. So here we go. This short video highlights a lot of the features in the experiences that we're building. Users start off by logging into the Vantari system on their laptop, and after they've logged in with their individual credentials, they don their headsets. This will take them into the virtual Vantari lobby, if you will, where they can select from about 20 different procedures. Vantari doesn't just do ultrasound. Our experience are the ultrasound ones, so that's what you're seeing here. The customizable patient environment is key. Our environment features an interactive ultrasound console where users can interact with the dials, the buttons, the trackball, and those interactions directly impact the image they're acquiring. There are a number of realistic patients, both male and female, but real-time scanning is critical for this whole experience. Users freely scan in real time and adjust their images using the console like they would in the real world. During learning mode, they can use training aids, like the shots of where to place the transducer, or the reference images of what the image should look like. And they can check what they've created by saying, check my image when they're ready. And that's when they get the guidance features on the VPAD. This lets them know if their image is of diagnostic quality. There's feedback on anatomy, gain, depth, and the required measurements. Throughout all of this, there's a virtual facilitator, and we'll hear her pop in here.
Identify the proximal aorta and freeze the image. Adjust the image as necessary and, once satisfied, press the Print Store button. Then, measure the AP diameter of the aorta and select the Print Store button again.
So those instructions are also provided for the user on the protocol board so they can refer to them at any time. And when the user goes into assessment mode, those guidance and feedback features are removed. Records of all these interactions are stored and reported in the educator and learner dashboards for further review. All right, Cynthia?
Well, I think Liz already talked about our focus on the user experience. And as part of that focus on the user experience, we felt it was really important to hear from our users as soon as possible. So we prioritized building the My First Scan experience, which is the tutorial for this for this application. And we used that to gather our first information from potential users. We went out to 3 different sonography schools across the country with My First Scan, and then we went back to 2 of those schools later with the first content module. In each case, at each site and with each module, we ran a usability study called a Think Aloud. While we needed to modify the standard approach for the Think Aloud usability research with VR, no existing best practices, there were no best practice guidelines that in existence, so we needed to sort of develop some of them. But the basic idea it still holds. In a Think Aloud usability study, you prepare some tasks and you give the user a brief introduction, not a lot, because you want to kind of see, part of what you want to see is whether or not they can engage with what you've developed when you're not there telling them what to do. So we give them a brief introduction and then we tell them what we mean by think aloud. We want them to just say what they are encountering as they're, in this case, in headset, what they expect to see when they're surprised, when they're frustrated, when they're looking for something, when they experience a success. And they're doing that the whole time as they go through, for us, either the My First Scan tutorial or the first educational content module, which was abdominal aorta. And the whole time they're going through and they're doing this think aloud, we're listening to them, we're making notes, we're watching them. So it's their physical behavior, their movement around the space as well. And we're learning from that the whole time. We also held structured debriefs with each user afterwards. So watching them engage in VR, listening to them, and then with the debriefing interviews after they were out of headset, this gave us a ton of data. We learned what parts of the VR experience were already working and that we wanted to build on to strengthen and expand, and where we needed to make important improvements. And we were able to make those changes in between each iteration and revise and enhance the product. These are the 3 schools that were willing to help us. They are participating research centers in the Intellios Research Network. They each allowed us to come out and work with students and faculty at their locations. And as Liz mentioned earlier, we expect our target audience to have little to no VR experience. So it was great that most of these research participants had little or no VR experience. It was just what we needed.
So the My First Scan sessions overall went very well. We did have a few unexpected issues that we uncovered, and we were able to address most of those as we went. A good example of that is rotating the transducer. In the real world, this is done with the wrist while the hand rests on the patient. So it creates like a pivot point, a rest point. In virtual reality, you're scanning really in midair, so there is no rest point. At first, we told users that they could rotate the transducer in the same way, but we started seeing very odd wrist movements, and you can kind of see that here in the picture. This was mitigated by making a change to the instructions, teaching them to rotate the transducer only with the thumbstick. That ability was there before, but in the narration, we had said you can, rotate your wrist or use the thumbstick. And of course, our users went to what they were comfortable with. So we took out the reference to rotating your wrist and just asked them to rotate with the thumbstick. And we also reduced the bed height. After the My First Scan usability studies, we came up with the VPAD idea. I wish we'd had it before the My First Scan, but we didn't. So we wanted to really get user feedback on that when we tested out the abdominal aorta module. It's a different way to provide user guidance and feedback, and it was really well received across all sites. But we did uncover some scoring concerns, and that led us to a decision to rework the technical side of the underlying scoring framework we had created. We tried out a new concept and it did not work as expected. So scoring completion as incomplete and vice versa. And we knew we couldn't move forward with that. So Vantari has reworked that underlying system to focus on landmark identification and triangulation. And we think we've got it now. So we are currently performing the scoring validation studies that Cynthia referenced, working with our subject matter experts and trying to correlate system and SME scores. So what's next? Well, the scoring system is the main focus right now. And while we're working to validate and refine that scoring, we are starting to build out the other 3 abdominal modules, and we're updating My First Scan to include the VPAD. Our plan is to go to market at the end of the year with only the aorta module and My First Scan at specific beta or pilot sites. This will allow us to collect real-world user data while we finish the rest of the abdominal protocols. And as I mentioned earlier, this will be used for low stakes purposes at the beginning. But in the future, after we have sufficient data and we've fine-tuned our product offering sufficiently, we would love to be able to offer this for higher stakes purposes, like providing clinical hours that applicants need for credentialing eligibility. And someday, maybe we can even do certification assessments in headset. Once we finish this first version of abdominal, the basic anatomy and scanning protocols, we can start to expand the scope with pathologies, different patients, different clinical environments. And at that point, we'll also be starting our OB development in earnest. So that is what we've got to share with you guys today. I did want to open the floor to questions. If there are any questions, and I wanted to invite you to connect with myself and Cynthia on LinkedIn if you would like. Thank you. I can't see the chat, so if there are any questions, somebody just speak up.
There are no questions, but a lot of applause. That was a really great presentation. I wish we could have it in person and actually experience that. It's really cool stuff. So we'll give people a moment in case anybody wants to ask a question. We are a small enough group if anybody wants to just come off mute.
Right.
I'm gonna add one comment. We sometimes get a concern expressed about the idea that we would be trying to replace real, like scanning of human beings with entirely virtual reality, and that's not in our plan at all. We always anticipate the need and the value of practicing on real patients. But it greatly increases the opportunity for students to do it. We've had people say, oh, I don't have to drive an hour into the school. I don't have to coordinate with another student to come and be my sample patient. Plus all the training aids that we think can be of great benefit to people.
I'll also address haptics, which is something that a lot of people, well, how can you do this in VR? What about the haptics? Vantari has incorporated micro vibrations. They're almost subconscious. You don't necessarily register them, but it kind of tricks your brain, a sensation of pressure. It's not great, and we've talked about other ways that we could do this, maybe a 3D printed transducer connected to the VR controller so that it has that shape of a transducer. But it's really, as it is, I think it's good enough. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to move forward and to offer a viable alternative for students to get additional practice where they're currently challenged getting people to scan or time with an ultrasound machine.
Yeah, I wondered about, since the like things like Apple Vision have come out, maybe since you've been working on this, is that a possibility maybe in the future for something similar with sort of mixed reality where you can, like, if you have the, I don't know if you call them dummies, but you have the fake people there to actually physically touch, and you do have something in your hand that you can control and feel the actual patient there, but
Absolutely.
combined with the visuals and everything.
Absolutely. We think of this foray into VR as our first toe in the water towards spatial computing. The 3D assets that we're creating for a 3D environment will also work in a spatial or mixed reality environment. So yes, that is something that we're probably marching to.
Mhm.
And it's something that we've made sure that what we're creating will work in spatial if we go down that path in the future.
Yeah, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. I had another question and I just lost it. Uh, no, no. Oh, I did have a question earlier just about so if you want to, so you say you want to add a new content area at some point, how much, what does that involve? Is it mostly working through Vantari? Is that right? Vantari?
Yes.
Um, does it take a long time for them to kind of create everything? I mean, now that you've got the kind of the base set up, you've got a lot of different assets and you've got the ultrasound machine there with, it's kind of wired up and everything to kind of function. Is it fairly easy to add new content, or what's that process like?
I think the answer to that depends on what we're scanning.
Hmm.
If we want to add in a pathology to the liver, we've already built the insides of that patient to scan a liver. If we want to scan the shoulder for musculoskeletal, that requires often the patient to move, and you scan while they're moving, and we don't currently have the inside of the shoulder built. So building the interior anatomy so that it translates to a visual that is an accurate representation of that anatomy. That's the most challenging piece. And of course, it always takes a good amount of time to work with your subject matter experts to define the content outline for whatever new area you're wanting to build out. And some features, such as Doppler scanning and a beating heart, we're, we're at the early stages of that. This experience is a tethered experience right now, meaning it has to be connected to a gaming laptop. The computing power is quite significant, and it relies on the laptop because the headsets aren't strong enough for that yet. We are working to condense that as much as possible so that we can make this a standalone device, a standalone system where all you need Maybe you have to have internet, it has to be connected to a laptop to load it on a headset, but then you could take that headset back to your village in Guatemala and practice as long as you had electricity, right? So those are some of the things that, we're challenges that we're looking at. So I don't know if that directly answered your question, but
Yeah, because I was just curious about, you get some um momentum and you gain some
mhm.
some sort of amortize the cost of the initial
Yes.
setup, and then after that you can start. But that makes a lot of sense that you do have each new thing is a new
It's a new
set of
thing,
things.
but we do have templates, and now we know how to do it because we fought for the last 2 years on figuring out the how and realizing that our initial scoring concept didn't work and being able to pivot and change that. Once that's validated, that's going to make things a lot faster for us, but it still isn't something that's going to be done in 3 months' time. Yeah, I think it'll take us a good 6 months per, at least 6 months per additional content area. And I think that's probably optimistic.
And are these, so I saw in the photos look like, and I haven't been involved in VR as much in the last few years, but you mentioned Meta, so probably a Quest
Yeah.
headset, and it looked like maybe a Vive. I think it was Vive, or maybe it was a different model.
It was a
Did
different
you-
model of Quest. We're building really for the Oculus headsets, the Meta headsets. I think we used 2s and 3s, maybe a 3S and maybe a Pro at the usabilities, but we've stayed within the Oculus line. There are some concerns with some of the other headsets about data management, and it's harder to protect or firewall your data. And while Meta isn't known for their strength in that area, it's not owned by other international entities like some of the other headset companies that give us pause and less transparency about what they're doing with it. So, in addition to being the headsets being affordable because they're mass market, they're at a lower price point. There's also that data component, and that's why we ended up going with the headsets we did. There are some that are have much better frame rates, for example, where the imaging can be that much more professional looking in headset, but this is sufficient for what we're doing.
And I don't know where, I don't, like I said, I haven't done it in a few years, but I don't know where the state of, but I noticed there was like hand tracking in the video, so you can actually get sort of the finer controls rather than using just the controllers to try to get there, or at least it looked like there was hand tracking there.
Yes, yeah, we're using the built-in hand tracking. There are gloves and things like that that are newer technology that can offer better haptics, but the pricing is pretty
Yeah.
high. Oh, I see your question about the headset, so there we go. And a pixel in virtual reality is referred to as a voxel. So
Three-dimensional, not just up and down, but also depth. So
yeah,
more complicated.
all right. Well,
So for
thank you.
those watching the recording that might not see the chat, the answer to that question was 9.6 million units.
Yeah, and growing. So
Yeah. That's tremendous.
yep.
So if anybody has a questions later, what's the best way for them to ask those questions? I think your last slide had your contact information on there.
Yes. It has our LinkedIn profiles, and we keep an eye on that. But you could also email me. It's elizabeth.santana@intellios.org. And I'd be happy to entertain questions or requests for information that way.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia and Liz, for sharing your work. Thank your whole team, of course. And thank you to everyone who joined us today and those that are catching this on the recording. Before we go, I want to give you a few quick reminders. Our next Lit Spotlight is happening 2 weeks from today. It's going to be featuring Chris Tompkins and Stephen Kalnoski from Rusticity Software. They'll be leading us through a topic that's easy to overlook, but is essential. Their session is Missing Step 1. Content parsing is difficult. They are going to share lessons learned while building the Rusticity generator and talk about why getting AI-ready content out of your SCORM library is trickier than most people expect. Also, please do not forget to save the date for our Lit Party on November 21st. We'll be gathering in person at MVP Collaborative in Troy, Michigan, and we want to see you there. I will put a link in the chat where you can find more details about the party. The call for proposals is currently open, so if you've been experimenting, building, or breaking things in the name of better learning, we want to hear about it. I will also drop the link to the call for proposals in the chat, along with where you can join our mailing list in case you're not already subscribed. You can, of course, also take a screenshot here to save these details for later. Proposals are due soon, I believe 1 week from today, and we'll be announcing the speaker lineup early next month. So we hope to see you at the next spotlight, at the party, or in the Slack channel. Until then, keep building cool stuff and come back and tell us about it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.